inspiring you to set the marketplace ablaze in partnership with an awesome and limitless God. This is the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Podcast, and this isn't business as usual. Here's your host and Chief Fire Igniter, Shay Bynes.
Welcome back to the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Podcast. This is your host, Shay Bynes, and our goal here is to inspire you to operate your business completely yielded and in partnership with our awesome and limitless God. My guest today is Scott Ritzheimer, CEO of Scale Architects, where he works with business leaders who desire to move past the painful stage of whitewater and on to predictable success. And yes, you'll have to listen in to learn a little about whitewater. I think you'll find it interesting. Now, what I loved so much about this conversation with Scott is that he admits that he is really good at working for God. But what he shares is that over the last year, he has been writing some new chapters with God and really leaning into the goodness of what it looks like to work with him. So listen in and hear how this unlikely entrepreneur went from working in the mailroom to being a partner in a business and found his sweet spot in building up the people who build things. But most importantly, what he is learning as he is doing it, led and empowered by the Holy Spirit. So listen in and enjoy this conversation with Scott Ritzheimer. Scott Ritzheimer, welcome to the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Podcast.
Hey, Shay, thanks for having me. I'm super excited about this conversation.
Well, I'm looking forward to it as well. We chatted right before I hit record. You have a new baby. So you told me that you are all smiles and no sleep.
Yeah, 100%.
So congratulations on the new arrival.
Thank you.
All right. So now you are CEO of Scale Architects. And so you are working with business leaders, nonprofit leaders, helping them to, find the right growth strategies to scale and all of those good things. And so I'm looking forward to chatting with you about what this journey looks like for you doing this in partnership with God. But let's start by you sharing, just give me a little background in terms of how you even showed up as an entrepreneur in the first place. Like, when did business start for you?
Yeah, that's a messy story.
I'm here for it. Let's go.
Yeah, I love podcasts and listen to a bunch of them. They're all like, yeah, I was like selling candy when I was in fourth grade. Like, that's my son. My son. That's going to be his story in about 15 years. I don't know. This is a funny story. So my wife and I hate doing the mail. Right? It's just the worst.
Yeah.
It's everything about it. And so it piles up, and it's just a mess. We miss bills. It's really bad. It's embarrassing. And so we decide, hey, it's time for chores. And my son says, hey, can I do the mail? And he's like, I love opening the mail. Like, he loves junk mail. Just everything. He's like, look at this coupon. It's amazing. I swear, within 3 days, he and my other son are set up outside just before our community pool. And they're selling junk mail, right? They're selling the coupons. They made $16 in like an hour selling
Scott, that
junk
is hilarious.
mail. It's just like, Lord help me.
That is hilarious.
One day I'll write a book and it'll be called Raising Visionaries. And you'll have heard it here first because it's the whole can of worms.
I will tell you that I have never heard the story of I started a business by selling coupons from the junk mail. Like, that is an original for me.
So that was not my story. I was always fascinated with how things worked, and before I knew anything about business, I remember one year in school we had a project, and I decided I was going to track stocks, and so my project for the year was a set of stocks, and I didn't know anything about it, but I was just fascinated with that aspect of it. So it's always more been business than entrepreneurship, if you will, which is a little different than most visionary leaders. Right. And then once I got saved, which is just about going into high school, that was just my world, was church. And I thought for the longest time I was going to be a pastor. And I desperately did not want to be a pastor, but it's like the spiritual thing to do, right?
Right.
And so it's just like this turmoil in my heart through college, because I want to do what the Lord wants me to do. I want to serve him. And a very, very long story short, I'll give you the highlights. I did not like high school. High school did not like me. I was a great student, a terrible person. It wasn't good. And so I actually orchestrated my school and a college, an Assemblies of God school out in Missouri, to allow me to enroll in both schools at the same time before dual enrollment was a thing.
You created your own dual enrollment scenario.
I did. I talked them all into it. Everything was great, but then I couldn't get any financial aid, and I couldn't get anyone to help me. And I'm like, why? Finally, someone gets back to me in late July from the school office and says, "Hey, you don't qualify because you don't have a GED or diploma." So I'm like, well, what do I do? They're like, is there a GED test you can take? And if that doesn't work, and go back to school, it'll be fine. Happened to be that there was a GED test that weekend. So ran in, took the GED test. It was fine. It was a weird experience because most people had to take smoke breaks about halfway through. It was just, it was a little interesting, but it's like, okay, I got it out of the way. It's done. I turn it in. He says, this is the first time that we're sending off our tests to a processing place in Arizona. So it's going to take 3 weeks to process, 2 weeks after the financial aid deadline.
Oops.
So my immediate thought is crap. My next thought is, well, I can go back to school. I can do like a work program or something. And the next thing he says is, Pennsylvania state law does not allow you to go to public school once you've attempted the GED.
Oh.
I dropped out with a 4.0.
Oh my gosh.
I dropped out. You were
serious about, I'm not doing this high school.
Yeah. And I didn't,
anymore.
I turned in the test. It was done. I didn't even know the decision that I was making. And so it was, in a way freeing, in a way devastating. I couldn't get into the school because I didn't have the money. We didn't have any money.
Right.
And I couldn't go back to high school. So I was just in nowhere's land. So the Lord just orchestrated the whole thing. I ended up looking, there were 2 schools that were just a ministry school, 2-year program kind of a thing. And, they were a fraction of the price of a regular school. And so I was set on getting out and going and doing my thing. And so went out to a ministry school in Kansas City. And that weekend, very first weekend there, I sit next to this absolutely beautiful woman who I find out is from Norway. And in her thickest accent, she tells me her name. And it was love at first sight for me. It took her a while to come around, but
but you were already convinced.
Yeah, I fell in love. She's my wife of almost 15 years now.
Wow.
So my entrepreneurial story, right, has really nothing to do with entrepreneurism throughout this whole extent. It's really, I'm going after some type of work in the ministry. I'm not good enough to be a musician. I've played music, still do, but I'm never going to make a living off of that. It's kind of like golf. It would take all the joy out of it the moment.
Right. So we'll just do it as a hobby.
So I wasn't going to do that. And it's youth minister, and it's that's bad idea. I would get a lot of people in a lot of trouble. Worship minister, that's out. Pastor, that's just not my gift. And so I'm just I have no idea what I'm going to do.
And this is while you're in ministry school.
Right? I'm in ministry school, and it's I have no idea where this is going. This is not some kind of occupation. I remember, you'll laugh. I remember thinking, I'm scratching all these things off the list. I'm is there Old Testament prophet? Can I make a living doing that somehow? What's left? It was hilarious. It was that bad. So what ends up happening is International House of Prayer, and the way that works is there are prayer missionaries who really sit before the Lord 24/7. It's a remarkable thing. Absolutely touched my life. And I found out they were starting another house of prayer down in Atlanta, Georgia. Had some connections with the person who was starting it through a youth ministry, which was a whole other story. Got me kicked out of 3 churches. Maybe we can come back to that. Maybe not. I don't know. It's probably not what you want most listeners to listen to, is a guy getting kicked out of church. But I did 3 of them at the same time. And so anyway, opportunity to connect with them the first year of getting started. So my wife and I got married in September of 2006, moved down to Atlanta, didn't know anybody, and just decided we're gonna make a living here. We both volunteered at the House of Prayer, and then there was a question of, how do we eat? And so we got there, no jobs, didn't know anybody. We were actually staying with the only people in the city that we knew, who I'd met at the school, who were just the sweetest couple. They're like our Atlanta mom and dad. But we stayed with them for a few months. So we really didn't have any place to stay, didn't have jobs, had no idea what we were doing. But we loved the Lord and we loved each other, right? That's what.
That's right.
And so my wife and I are standing at a meeting, and they say, "Hey, we just feel called to pray for anyone who needs jobs or finances or something along those lines. Would you stand?" And so we stand very quickly, and a couple of people pray for us, and that was about it. And we were walking out after the service, and some lady comes running over to us, who we had seen and didn't really know, and it was a little awkward. And she's like, "Hey, hey, and what?" And she's like, "I just feel like the Lord called me to do this." And she gives us a check. I don't remember what it was for. It was $500, $1,000. It's not a small amount of money,
right? And
she's like, "But it's not this. There's so much more than this, and I'm not really sure what that is. But let's just see what the Lord has." And again, kind of fast forward through a series of events, and my wife got hired by the lady who came up to us, her husband's company.
Right?
Okay. Started. And so she's working there for a couple days, and they're, just the company is doing awesome. They need people like crazy. I had a couple of software programs that needed tech support. And so the founder's like, "Hey, is there anyone that you know that does tech support?" And she's like, "Well, my husband's good at computers, I guess, and that was about the extent of it. We did an interview, but the reality of it was I was breathing. And so I qualified at the time. And so I started in tech support at this company called Start Church in January of 2007, just a couple of weeks after my wife did. And
what was the name of it again?
Start Church.
Start Church, but it was a software company.
It was a for-profit company that helped churches get started, and we did it through a bunch of free stuff. We did it through software, and we did it through services as well.
Okay.
So I was in the proverbial mailroom. In addition to tech support, I was taking all the mail and faxes that came in and processing all of those. It was pretty crazy. And 2 months after that, the founder of the company sells it to a group out of Nashville. And so it's like, oh, great.
Now what's going to happen to us?
So the group in Nashville ran a similar organization to ours, decided they were going to run both together from their own states, right? So one in Nashville, one in Atlanta, and just do whatever they could to keep it going. And, it wasn't anyone's fault necessarily, but our company was just systematically destroyed in the process. Everything that they did, they tried to do right, and it seemed to go wrong. It was really bad. It was owner financed, and so that really complicated things. There was a ton of tension between the founder and the people who had purchased it. They couldn't get past it because they still had to work together to get paid. And, and so it was just really, really ugly, really painful 16, 17, 18 months. And by virtue of my relationship with both groups, I ended up kind of in the middle of that and seeing it from both sides, and feeling 20 years old, feeling the pressure of this company's going under, right? And I've got to do something to save it. And we can come back to it later, but there was a lot during that time that I learned, but there was a lot of lies that were actually embedded during that process that I'm still working through today. And even just over the past week, the Lord's been revealing things. So keep going through our chronological series of events here. We get to, that was March of 2007 that the company was sold. We're in August of 2008. And the company in Nashville calls the founder, his name's Raul, and says, "Hey, we've given it our best shot. We're calling it quits. You can have the stuff, but you got to come. You got 24 hours to get it." He grabs a U-Haul, drives up. On his way up, he calls me and says, "Hey, will you help me run the company? I think we can rebuild it."
How long had it been? So this was about 16 months or so?
Yep.
And and at that time you were in what role?
You
weren't doing in the mail. You weren't in the mailroom at that point anymore. You were still in the mailroom.
I was doing that, and I was doing IT tech. I worked the least hours, and I had the lowest hourly rate of anyone in the office. And I was the person that everyone came to if they had questions.
Wow. And then you're getting a call and so do you want to be my partner in this business? And
it wasn't completely out of the blue because we had actually talked about, we were in the process of starting another business together that was going to be a similar thing in a business space.
Sure.
And so it wasn't totally out of the blue, but it was like, oh, wow, this is a big thing.
It might have seemed that way to the others.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. So by this point, there's 3 of us on staff. We had gone from a staff of 14 to 3. The other 2 stayed with the other company, and so I was the only one left. So I don't know if he wanted me there or had me there, but one way or another, that's how it worked out. So we get the company back effectively at the beginning of September. And, the Lord's just on it and the phone starts ringing, and Raul was just fantastic at communicating with pastors and, getting the sales done, but also like he had this gift he would go and we would do conferences and he would get up, he would teach tax law for 8 hours and they would come and pray and prophesy over him when he was done. Like it was just remarkable.
Yeah. He always had a partnership with God and how he was flowing, whatever he was teaching.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, the Lord just starts to bless it. Well, it's September 2008. Right? Like the world was falling apart.
Yes, and I remember
then. For our first 6 months as a company, the stock market drops by 30, almost 40%. It's like a lot of people are like, this is it,
Yeah.
And we slowly but surely just built up and built up and built up. And that started what is still to this day, 2008 to now, do the math on that, beyond my capacity at the moment, but 13, 14 years of just steady double-digit growth that we hit again.
That's amazing.
And 1 year we were up 75%. And so right before that had all taken place, and we got the company back, I was really struggling with, do I stay here? Do I go into ministry? Do I go start something else? What was it? And, the founder and I were friends and he came to me and said, hey, I had a dream about you last night. And I'm like, okay. And he just kind of waited for a second. And then he's like, I saw you at a fork in the road and you're having the hardest time deciding which way to go. And you were just sitting there sweating and just concerned and scared and didn't know. And he said, I saw the Lord come in. He said, you pick whichever way you go, I'll bless you.
Come on.
And ultimately that's what led to me being there at Start Church. I worked with Raul, ended up as COO for a while and then took over as CEO for him. He was able to step back from the company, ran it for several years. And it was just a remarkable experience.
Wow. That's a really interesting journey. Yeah. I mean, here you are in ministry school wondering, okay, I love the Lord. I want to serve him. I have no idea what it looks like. You're running through your checklist of things that all seem like really awesome, I love Jesus types of things to do. Business isn't even on your list. Then the desire for money and taking care of the family and all of that get you into business on the bottom floor. And then you end up being a partner later. So it's a pretty interesting chain of events. What I find really interesting is that when you're telling that story about what you said, his name's Raul.
Yeah.
So when you came into that, you were able to see a demonstration of ministry through business from the beginning, because that was being modeled for you. What was that like for you? Was that something? Did that seem like, oh, that's natural. Oh, I hadn't thought about this from this perspective. And this is awesome. Now I can see how I can minister through my work. Or was it like, this is unusual? Like, what was that like for you at that young age?
Yeah, it was unusual and natural all at the same time. And because even without like his gifting, we sat at the intersection of work and faith. Right? Like we were a for-profit company who worked almost exclusively with pastors, right?
Yes.
Starting churches.
Yes.
And so there was an unavoidable mixing of those two worlds from early in my life, really.
Yes.
And initially I didn't pay any attention to it. It was a job, it was nothing to it. But as we start growing, and especially as we started bringing in new employees, and we're like, what does it mean to really work here at Start Church?
Right.
That's where those two worlds really just wove together to where, we were a Christian company. We worked with Christians and we did, but we were also a company, and so it was really that place of, we would get on the phone and tell people they were, several $100s behind on their payments. And then we'd pray with them and ask God to provide, you know what I mean? And yes. it was 100% authentic. It was genuinely who we were. And there was a very, very missional mindset about the way that we did work, with the accountability and drive of a for-profit organization.
Yeah, super good. So then, okay, now take me from those foundations to then, because now you're a CEO of Scale Architects. So bring me there.
Yeah. So during my time at Start Church, I realized I love building businesses. I wasn't crazy. This sounds bad, but I wasn't crazy about starting churches. Like, wasn't center of my bullseye. And so it's what we did, and we did it really well. And I was passionate about it because that's what it was supposed to be. But I didn't wake up thinking, oh, I hope I can start another church today. I woke up thinking, man, what if we could, what if we could become this something or other? And how the Lord's gifted me and everything is really about building the things that build things. That's really, really what it is. And particularly, it's the people that do it, right? And the very real mechanical aspect of getting groups of people to work together. And so that was where I was fascinated. I was reading all the time on it and realized that's what I really love to do. As the company was growing, I was CEO of the organization, and there was just a crossroads of, I either need to change that and go all in on this, or I need to look at something else. And so during that time, just kind of mulling on it, I came across a book that I've got behind me over here called Predictable Success by a gentleman named Les McEwen, who's now a partner of mine. And he talks about this stage in an organization's life cycle. What it's all about is how organizations progress from life to end of life. And there's this stage 3 that's called whitewater. And it's this place where a really successful organization kind of gets dumb. It's like we all of a sudden we're screwing up in ways that just don't make sense.
Right.
And it's very, very painful time, especially for the leadership, because it's like, is this it? Like, have we run our course on it? And for myself and Rose, massive amounts of tension, because we felt like we had walked off the face of the map. It was just over. So hear about Les on a podcast, read the book, actually listen to the audiobook. And so my wife is from Norway, and we were out in Norway, dropped off the kids with her family, and then went on a trip. It was awesome, down to Monaco, right? To see a Formula One race. I'm a Formula One nerd.
Yes.
And so for those who don't know, Formula One's race cars, and Monaco is like the event of the Grand Prix circuit. And so it's this tiny little country between France and Italy, right on the coast of the Mediterranean. And it is stunning. Absolutely.
I've seen pictures. Absolutely stunning.
So it's like your chance of a lifetime to go see this. It all lines up. And from there, it was a 2-hour flight. There's no big deal. So on this amazing, once in a lifetime opportunity, romantic trip with my wife, what am I doing? I'm sitting on the plane listening to an audiobook about business life cycle. And while I'm on the plane, we had a stop in Amsterdam. We were flying down to Nice from there. And on that he starts talking about whitewater. And the very first thought that comes into my head as he's explaining just how terrible it is we're in whitewater. That's where we are. And just all the comfort of knowing, hey, we're on the map still, right? And the cool thing about whitewater, if anyone's in a business and they're feeling this way, the awesome thing about whitewater is it's not the end. It's not the last stage. It's actually one stage away from the best time that you can have in an organization's life cycle. It's tremendous. So there's hope. The second thought that came almost immediately after that was, if I could help companies in whitewater every day of my life, I would die a happy man.
Wow. So you felt an instant connection to that type of work, which helps make that transition for you.
Yep. So it's 2014, and nothing happened. We came back from the trip. We had a wonderful time. Mercedes won, which was kind of annoying, but it didn't ruin the whole thing. But no, we had a great time down there, and we just came back, and we were still in whitewater and still doing the thing. Kind of forgot about the book, and almost 4 years later, we're still there. It's just grinding, and it should feel wonderful. There's $7 million organization at the time, and 50, 60 people on staff. Loved working with the people that we were working with, and it just wasn't working right. And so
can we talk about that for a second? Yeah. Because some people are here, well, okay, you're doing well profitably, you enjoy the work you're doing with your staff. So when you say it's just not working, what did that look like for you? How did that show up for you?
Yeah. So a couple of things. There was just nuts and bolts. Our revenue was climbing and doing awesome. Our profitability was collapsing.
Okay,
every
gotcha.
year it was falling more and more. There were key parts of our business that, while our business as a whole was moving forward, they were dying, and we could do nothing to stop it. There was some relational stuff that was going on that was just really, really challenging. When there's that much pressure and you're doing well, and it doesn't seem like it should feel like that much pressure, there's all this head stuff that goes on, when in the early days, there was a ton of pressure, but there should be. We're getting a business off the ground. Now we're on the successful side. We've been super successful for a long time. We shouldn't be feeling this way.
Like we're grinding every day.
Yeah. And we'd figured it out. Why are we doing so poorly at figuring this out? What's going on? And there was a whole lot of other stuff to it, but and now I work with folks who are in this all the time. I can tell you every single successful organization hits this stage, every single one of them. And every one of them is like, what in the heck happened? So for those who are there, like it happens because you did something right. It's because what it takes to grow in that earlier stage and what it takes to scale an organization once you get that many people all trying to move in the same direction are complementary in many ways and perpendicular in other ways. Yeah. And so, Marshall Goldsmith's "What got you here won't get you there." There's very specific set of circumstances that's true for businesses in that space. And so I got smart and got the book back out. And in the back of the book, there's a little thing, how to get out of whitewater into predictable success. And there's 5 things in there. And I took the book, I actually copied it out onto a Pages document and said, this is what we're going to do.
Yes.
And so we did. We worked through each of those things. And it was a painful process. I'm not going to lie. It was a very, very difficult process. But it had a massive change inside the organization to where we added close to $1 million to the bottom line of the organization and just got so much clarity coming out of that. And it was getting through that process. And as we're getting through that process, I realized this is what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
This is really what I'm supposed to do. And once we're out of it, like, I can't do it anymore. You know what I mean? Right. It's like, we're not in it anymore.
Right.
And so really, right as we were progressing out of that, I started looking at what I was going to do and decided, hey, I want to do this. I did it for one organization. I had consulted with a few others as well. And I was like, I want to do this for a lot of organizations.
Yeah.
And right around that exact same time, it was actually the last week that I was planning to be at Start Church, Les opened up a program where he invited people genuinely into his living room to learn.
This is the author of Predictable Success.
Author of Predictable Success. To open up the behind the scenes and say, here's what I do with companies to get them into predictable success, and you can do it too.
Right.
And so I trained directly with him in his living room back in 2019 and started my own consultancy 2020, basically January 1.
Wow.
Which again,
wait, did you say January? Wait. Yes. Wait, I had a moment. I had to come back. Wait.
Yes. Which is, yeah.
So you started 2 months before the lockdown announcements.
Yeah. So moral of the story for anyone listening is watch what I do on LinkedIn. And the moment that I say I start something new, short everything, you and I will make a ton of money and we'll go to a Formula One race together. Right. That's it. Let's call it a deal. Because I'm 2 for 2 on economic collapses within the first 6 months of starting a business. And so 2020 was just exceptionally challenging year. It's difficult to start a consultancy, difficult to be a consultant because he has the answers during this time. But again, Lord's hand's just been on it. And so
I love it.
Full circle here. This year, I'd been working with Les on how to build my consultancy and what to do about it. And he came to me this year and said, hey, with everything that you've accomplished, would you help me train other coaches to do this?
Oh, okay. So now it's a bit of a partnership to then expand others to be able to do it.
And so that's what in leading scale architects, that's what I do. I do work with CEOs. I help them. It's still a part of and the heart of what I do.
Yes.
But I've realized, Lord's gifted me to help train other people to do that as well. And so
I love it.
That's what I'm doing now. And
wow,
it's awesome. It's
that's so good. That's so good. Okay. So all right. Now I need to dig into how you do what you do. And what a partnership with God for you looks like in your work. I remember us chatting really briefly a few weeks ago, and you were telling me how one of the things that you really had to work through was how to not operate just like in the grind yourself, like how to flow with God and work, not to take on burdens that are not yours to carry, how to just like walk that out with Him. Talk to me about what that's like for you, how you're finding a flow and working with God, as a driven and motivated person, but wanting to just kind of find that rhythm and flow that takes that pressure off of you. Yeah. And also share with me what it's like for you to be sensitive to the Holy Spirit's leading when you're working with your clients. They're not pastors of churches anymore. They're business owners now. And so talk to me about that what you're experiencing there.
Yes, it's good. I'm really good at working for God. When it comes to working with Him, we're writing some new chapters at the moment. And it is, I'm very good at putting that weight on my shoulders, moderately good at bearing that weight on my shoulders until I just completely collapse. So, in walking through this, especially over the course of the last year, I remember a couple months in just looking at it and saying like, I was fine because I had sold my stake at the company and was good for several years. But that's not how I felt. Like it felt like this is never going to work. This is never going to happen. And I woke up, it was probably 3 a.m. on a Saturday and couldn't fall back to sleep. And I realized the Lord was just saying, hey, I want to talk to you. So I got up, I went over, I have an office actually at our church. That's where I'm at right now. And came to the office, sat down with a notepad and just started writing. And Lord revealed a whole lot to me today, but and one of the things He said that has been the most profound in kind of answering your question is, you're worried about providing for today. I'm not worried about that. I've got you covered. What I'm working with you on right now is providing for generations. And that's entirely out of my shoulders cannot bear that. Right? I can't even conceive that. Like name your great grandparents, right? How many of them can you, seriously. And that's 2-3 generations back.
Yeah.
And so that's so far outside of what I can contemplate that it's really helped me to just say like, what are we doing today?
Yes.
What are we doing today? And I've had mixed success on showing up that way. But when I show up in the morning, the very first thing I do is sit with Him and just say, hey, Lord, what's on your heart? And then, just hearing where He's at and then saying, what are we doing today? And He'll say, hey, call this person or I'll go straight out of that and do my priorities for the day. And it's just night and day. I'll be the first to say I'm a work in progress. But just that sense of doing it with God. And some days He shows up and then there's whispers and there's miracles and there's cool things that happen. Most days there isn't. Most days there's, I got that. I know that I'm with Him. You know what I mean? It's like,
I do.
When I was working with my dad, we had a farm, and then we had a bunch of property, and we spent a lot of time working together. And some of those times it was this, but most of those times it was shoulder to shoulder, and we were working together. And so some of those times are that way. The Lord, there's face to face with the Lord, but there's also shoulder to shoulder time.
Yes, I love that.
And just walking through that, especially this year, has been new.
Yeah, that's so good. I love the way he spoke to you about the multi-generational focus and how that was that pivot. Because it's like at that point, you're like, I already know that I can't do that. I can't. So I know that if I'm going to do that, that's going to be with you.
I'll be dead.
It's so
like when they're doing that thing, I'm gone. Like there's literally nothing I can do. And so, that. It'll humble you pretty quickly.
Oh, for sure.
In the same token, it's so freeing and really sets today into perspective.
Yeah. Sure. So good. Tell me one of your favorite stories, whatever kind of comes to mind in terms of the fruit of hearing the voice of the Lord concerning something in business and doing that thing, even if it's contrary to maybe how you would have normally thought to do it, or your experience might have told you differently. That's one of your favorite stories of just seeing how God's at work.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember a single one of these and struggling to remember one. So what I'm going to tell is a story that is a story of stories, because
Go for it.
It's happened so many times, but I'll have this thing, and I didn't recognize it until last 18 months, something like that, where I'll get my mind on something and it's going to happen. Like I don't care what gets in my way. I'm walking through walls and this thing's going to happen. Sometimes that's the Lord. Like he put that in me, right? There's a lot of times that's not the Lord. I put that in me. And I'm starting to recognize the difference. And so it's that thing that actually gets me in the most trouble, right? It's that place where I spend the most energy with the least return. And so there have been so many times, again, I'm trying to buy myself time to remember a specific instance, but
keep going on the flow you are, because I love what you're sharing.
Folks will recognize this. When you cross over that, I have to make this happen thing, right? 9 times out of 10, it's not going to happen. That 1 time out of 10 that it does happen, it probably shouldn't have happened, and you're not going to get out of it what you expected. And so what I've started to recognize is when I cross that line, to stop. And so there have been multiple times where I've had really important meetings that I'm like, I have to prepare for this. And doing 19,000 things, like I am the business, and so it's like, I can't delegate, and I'm used to that, having a bunch of employees to going to none.
Yes.
I would fire me if I could, but I can't. And so I'll get to this point where like, I got to work an all-nighter. I got to stay home or stay at work and not go home. And I've learned that virtually every single time that's the wrong call. For me, I'll put it that way. And there are times when I work into the night, right? But it's done in a very different heart and a very different mindset, because that's a reality of starting a business, and I'm okay with that. But there are other times when it's like, I'm scared, right? That's really what's going on. And so there've been 3, 4, 5 times really in the last 3 months where this has happened, and I've just chosen it's not going to get done. Like the Lord will do something with it. He knows what needs to get done. And I'll tell you, every single one of those meetings has been postponed, or they've gone a completely different direction.
Yes.
And all of that work would have been for naught anyway.
Yes. That's so good.
And it just happens again and again and again. And I never expected, like it's starting to get through. It really is. But there've been so many times where it's like, I'm going to lose this whole account if I don't get ready for this. And they'll call the next day and okay, here's a specific example. I was having a time with the Lord. It's just really intense, and just praying through some stuff that's been with me for a long time, and doing it with a spiritual advisor that I have. And so we're set to go for an hour. We went 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Wow.
I had meetings after that hour. So we get off and we're, 2 hours and 17 minutes. And so one meeting we're already through. Next meeting, I'm 17 minutes into it. And I get an email from the person. I'm sweating bullets because I'm like, I've just totally blown this. It's disrespectful. It's all these things. I get an email from the person saying, "Hey, I'm so sorry I'm late. This is at 2:16. Basically the same time we finished. Can we still jump on a call?" Sure, no problem at all. But it's like, even little things like that, that, I would have blown that 15 minutes and that whole hour ahead of it anyway. The Lord knows, and He'll work on those things. So
it's such a journey of really learning to trust. And I love how you're recognizing the things that are going on in your mind and your heart, as so then you can kind of work through whether this is me trying to force something or me trying to grab hold of something versus, I feel the Lord on this, on my pursuit of this particular thing. So that's super good. Yeah. One other thing I want to ask you about from a client perspective, because as a business owner, as a consultant, coach, et cetera, there's a particular solution that you offer in the marketplace, and not everybody is the right client for the thing that you do. Sometimes people who don't understand that God is the source and that everyone and everything else is a resource, they can find themselves in situations where they would recommend their own services with people who it's not really a good fit for. And it's with all of that in mind that I'm asking you this next question. So you specifically work with people on scaling, right? I'm curious to know whether you run into circumstances where people come to you thinking that they want a particular thing, but in your process of maybe even evaluating your consultation prior to signing a contract on the dotted line situation, that I don't think that this, like the thing that you think that you want, I'm sensing this is not what actually is supposed to happen here. Do you have those situations happen? And you're nodding your head yes. So I'm believing that you're experiencing those things. So talk to me about that. And from the perspective of you being, have you always been comfortable with that conversation, or have you struggled with saying no to something that's not quite the match here, or having to release what you believe is a truth, regarding that person, knowing that it means that you're not going to get a client?
I've referred probably twice, maybe 3 times as much work as I've actually taken. So I think there's an enormous amount that, to me, even from a business perspective, you take the Lord out of it, that's just playing the long game. You know what I mean? That's just, the Lord's built that in as just truth. Is it hard? Yeah. And have there been times when I've taken on folks who I shouldn't have? Yes. And have those worked out? No. No. It doesn't take long to realize, hey, this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. So I think in many ways, I'm fortunate to have not done that very often.
Yeah.
I've been fortunate to meet the people that I need to meet to know who to send these folks to whenever they come.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of free work. I do lots of free consultations with folks. My goal is not to sell someone on a call. My goal is to give them value. And if I give them value and what I offer and what they want align, then it's an easy deal. Yes. If I give them value and what I offer and what they need to not align, then I've pointed them in the right direction and given them some free resources. So the fortunate thing that I kind of lucked into is a lot of what we do is that's built into the fabric of how we work. Les is a believer as well, and that's infused some of what he does. So a significant portion of what we do is talk to people about where they actually want to take the organization. Because I talk to folks who are in whitewater, right? And the normal thing is, I want to get to predictable success. I want to scale this thing up. I want to go from, a restaurant to a restaurant chain. I want to fill in the blank. But they don't actually want that. To run a chain of restaurants, you are not in the kitchen. You're not in the front of house. That's not what you do anymore. And for folks like myself, those are waters that we enjoy. For folks who they started the business to do that, to connect with their customers in the front of house, or to be the one who's coming up with new ideas and inventing them, to be the one who's doing the performance, if you will, that creates the sale, and all, those are all wonderful. To be the one wearing the apron behind the coffee bar, those organizations are meant to be run in and stay in the stage called fun, which precedes whitewater. And so what I'll do for a lot of them, they're not, we don't have this whole big thing. They don't represent a ton of money for me, but I can save them so much pain and anxiety by saying, hey, let's do this. Let's actually reverse engineer this. Let's unwind it a little bit for you so that you can get to a place where this company is what you've actually dreamt that it would be.
Yeah.
And we tend to skew our dreams in one way or another. And being able to really cut that for them is one of the most rewarding things that I get to do.
Yeah, super good. And do you have time for one other question?
Yeah.
All right. So when you do consultations with clients, are you at the point now where you have an ear to hear the Holy Spirit in the midst of your conversations with your clients, and you have embraced the with factor in just even consultations? And you're shaking your head yes. So I believe your answer is yes. And so talk to me about that and what that looks like for you working with people.
I'll say yes, but it looks different than what I think most people would expect from that. So I find myself, I have a gift of clarity, right? And so you present something and I just see the whole thing. And that gets me into a lot of trouble. And so for me, it's actually, my thing is not like insight into seeing more to telling them, go do this, do that. It's actually insight into not saying what I see. And that's been the bigger thing for me. The bigger journey has been like, you want an answer, I'll give you an answer, but realizing people aren't ready for the answer yet. That's good. A lot of it has been that. I'll have moments where the Lord will speak and he'll say, hey, say this, do that, and the other. More often than not, it's just walking in the clarity that he's given me and actually knowing when to not present all of that. Because
you can hold that one.
Yeah.
That's really good. Super good. I appreciate you sharing with me today. I really enjoyed our chat.
Absolutely. It was fun.
I love it. So for those who want more information about what you do, what's the best way for people to connect with you, Scott?
Yeah. So the best way is to go to scalearchitects.com. Look for Scale Architects or Scott Ritzheimer on any social media. We're there as well. But one of the things that's super cool about what I get to do is help people to understand their natural leadership gifting, their natural style. And so we actually have a quiz on scalearchitects.com called the Leadership Styles Quiz. You can see it on the homepage or in the menu, and it'll tell you there's 4 different leadership styles. 2 of them we don't call leaders, in most environments. And so if you feel like, hey, I'm a leader, I want to know more about her. Hey, do I have a leadership gifting? Then the assessment's awesome because it really does this tremendous job of honoring all 4 leadership styles and helping you understand, hey, what are my rough edges and what do I bring to the table? So this is a great first step to find out more about what we do.
Awesome. Love it. Well, thank you, Scott. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Shay.
I really enjoyed my conversation with Scott, and I have with me Mr. Bynes, CEO of Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur, so that we can talk about some takeaways. What's going on, Phil?
All is well.
Good. All right. Well, let's talk about some of your takeaways. Give me number 1.
Okay. Number 1, your shoulders aren't broad enough to handle the plans that God has for you without him. He was sharing that, a lot of times the things that he was trying to do for God instead of with God, he was finding out that what God had planned for him was bigger than what his shoulders could handle. And that is so true. The plans that God has for us they're always bigger than what we think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think he was talking about this whole thing around generations. And as soon as you think about generational impact, it's like, if there's anything that will humble you and how much you can do versus what God can do, it's when you're challenged with the thought of generations and generations in terms of impact.
It puts a new light on the scripture that says, I know the plans I have for you, the plans to do good and not evil, and, to bring you to an expected end. Well, our expected end is not the same as God's expected end. And that's why we need to do it with him, because we will fall way short of what he expects to do for us or with us.
Yeah. So good. All right. What's another one?
The second thing I have here is doing things with God is both face to face and shoulder to shoulder. And what that brought out in my mind is like, and I think he was talking about actually doing some work with his actual father and how, sometimes what happens is, it's face to face. You're talking, you're communicating, God is telling you what to do, or your father or whoever you're working with is telling you what to do. And you're looking directly in their face. And sometimes you're doing it and you can feel their presence. They're doing it at the same time as you're doing it. And I thought that was good.
That is such a good picture and analogy for just the different ways that we engage with God in our work. So good. Okay, what else?
The third one I have here is if you get in the mode of, I got to make this happen, it is usually to the exclusion of God.
The grind.
He talked about, 9 times out of 10, when he finds himself in that situation, is without God, and then that 1 time out of 10, it could be, it might also be without God, or you're doing it for God and it's not necessarily what he would have you to do. So that's not good. What's the word I'm looking at? Those aren't good statistics. So we always want to make sure that we're doing it with God and not trying to make it happen. That's making it happen is like evidence that we're probably not doing it with God.
Doing things in our own strength primarily.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the fourth thing I have here is just because God gives you insight about someone or something, that doesn't mean that you are supposed to share it, and that there is a mouthful, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you get insight is not for you to bring correction or whatever else you think it's about. Sometimes God is just giving you some clarity on that person so that you know the best way to deal with them, not reveal what you know.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah. So good. Those are great takeaways. And I love these conversations, Phil, that we get to have because you get to talk to people in so many different aspects of where they are in the process of learning how to walk this thing out with God. The entirety of the spectrum of the journey, from just the beginnings of, making a shift all the way to like, I've been doing this thing for years and just going deeper in him. It's just so fun to hear just what this looks like for so many different people and just those moments of time and those moments of growth that people experience. So super good. Yeah. Love this. All right.
Beautiful.
Go ahead.
And another beautiful thing about that is sometimes you meet people in different or varying levels of success.
Yes.
That are walking these things out. So you get to see someone that maybe is at the same level of success as someone else, but they're at a different stage of walking it out with God. And it's really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. Super good. All right. Now, before we go, just want to let you all know, if you've been listening to the podcast the last few weeks, there's all kinds of goodness going on in the land of Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur. We have a live virtual KDE Live is coming up on October 8th and 9th. We'll be opening up registration very soon. So make sure that you are on our email list around that. We've got KDE advisory services coming soon. We just opened up Kingdom Catalyst. We had applications open, for that and moving forward with that, which I'm super excited about. But there's just lots of goodness going on right now in Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur. So if you are not on our email list, if you are not subscribed to our email list where you get our rapid fire emails and you get information around, just kind of what's going on, events, opportunities to engage, product, services, whatever, make sure you are on the list. You can connect with us at kingdomdrivenentrepreneur.com/connect and just enter your name and email, and you'll be able to stay up to date with what's going on in Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur. Phil, is there anything that you wanted to add before we close today's episode?
No, ma'am. We're good to go.
Good to go. All right. Well, you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll look forward to talking to you more next week on the next episode of the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Podcast. Take care and God bless.
Thanks for joining us on the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, we encourage you to subscribe and spread the word. And don't forget, you can gain access to even more resources, plus a thriving community of fire starters by visiting our website at kingdomdrivenentrepreneur.com.